So, you may be wondering how I got in this situation, legless and crucified in a town square, surrounded by a group of demented Disney adults. Well, it's actually quite boring. You see, I stumbled upon the house of the local mayor, and inside I happened to run into a priest. I thought everything was fine, but then I realised he was a Catholic. How did I know? Anyway, unfortunate shenanigans ensued, and well, here I am. But this isn't the end of our story, au contraire. We've only just begun. Fear and Hunger is a game that came out in 2018. The game was developed by Happy Painting Studios, aka some guy named Miro, who may be the only man in the world besides myself to appreciate how great the Twilight franchise is. But who is he really?
Explorers in the further regions of experience, demons to some, angels to others.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So the first game was pretty good for the most part. It's a 2D dark fantasy RPG with immersive sim elements. The game is impressive in its scope, with multiple stories, narratives and endings being crammed into a relatively small space. Each playthrough is different than the last. How you approach the game is dependent upon the items you acquire throughout. All the loot you can get from crates and barrels is randomized, meaning you can acquire incredibly powerful items, books and potions very early on, or you can have an inventory filled with dirt that smells suspiciously like the second Joker movie. What's amazing about it is how much a playthrough can change with just a slight variable. Maybe you lose a limb in a fight, maybe you manage to get a certain weapon or item early on that allows you to take on the dungeon's more powerful foes. Maybe that weapon makes you arrogant though, and you try your luck against an enemy you aren't prepared for and get murked. The game has a reputation for being unfair or cruel, and at times the game can certainly feel that way. But that's the point. When you first play the game, you'll likely die, over and over and over and over again, and you'll quickly realise whether or not this game is for you. The more you play and come to grips with the game's mechanics, the further you can get in the game, until eventually you make it all the way to the end. For example, at first the guards come across as nigh unstoppable foes that you can't overcome without losing a limb or dying, until you work out their attack pattern. So every turn they attack with their cleaver, right? Which will almost certainly take a limb, leaving you in a bit of a tight spot for the rest of the game. So we destroy that cleaver arm first. On their second round they use a special coin flip attack, that if successful is an immediate game over, but if you use guard in the second round, you'll negate it. This attack happens every 3 turns hereafter, so 2, 5, 8, etc. From there it's a simple matter of taking out its legs, guarding that special attack, and ultimately killing it. The special coin attack is probably the game's best mechanic. Themes of destiny and fate are woven through the game's narrative, and this mechanic immerses the player into that theme. Numerous enemies have their own special coin flip attack, and not all of them are simply blocked, so even at your most knowledgeable and experienced, your playthrough can fall apart based on the serendipity of a single coin flip. But the game isn't without its flaws, and there were parts that, for my money, could do with improvement. The characters are fairly strong considering how archetypal they first appear to be, but after the halfway point of the game, they don't really have a lot to comment on or say on major plot developments that in some cases affect the character in a very specific way. There are a handful of scenes that add dimensions to the characters, but personally I would have liked to have seen more. For example, Darce is a knight who arrives at the dungeon looking to rescue the commander of our army, Lagarde. Put a pin in him, by the way. In fact, put a lot of pins in him. In the game's final act, he reveals that he betrayed his own army and Darce to achieve his goals of world conquest. We find him in the Void, in his new form. This is the product of all his betrayals and schemes. And if Darce is with you when you confront him, she'll have this to say to the man who betrayed her. I mean, granted, she does monologue about how hopeless she feels before this, but it's not something directly related to Lagarde, and it leaves the motivations of the character more than a little vague. Sexual assault is a pretty major theme in the game as well, and I don't want to say it's poorly handled, but it's certainly ubiquitous to the point of occasionally being overused, at least for my taste. Mileage may vary there though. I'd still put it ahead of Game of Thrones' handling of sexual assault and abuse, but if it's not a subject you're comfortable with, it might be worth only experiencing the game through YouTube videos. Like these ones, shameless plug. And then there's the combat. The combat in Fear and Hunger can be engaging and fun in a unique way for the RPG genre, but unfortunately for some enemies it can become a chore the more used to the game's mechanics you are. To go back to the guards for example, When you first figure out the strategy for beating them, you feel a certain sense of accomplishment. You're one step closer to defeating the puzzle that is this game. But in later playthroughs, you avoid fighting them more to not have to waste the time than the actual tensions that fighting them would bring because of the repetition. They all have the same pattern, but overall it's still a pretty excellent game that's hard to recommend, especially when you take into account its sequel. Star Wars had Empire Strikes Back, Fallout 1 has Fallout 2, and Fear and Hunger has Fear and Hunger Termina. Fallout 1 might be the best point of comparison for Fear and Hunger, in that it too is a great interactive RPG with a good story, whose sequel features so many minor tweaks and improvements that it makes going back to the original difficult. And in this video, I want to make the argument to you, the people, with questionable enough taste to watch my YouTube videos, why you should play Fear and Hunger Termina. Fear and Hunger Termina finds the player stranded in a woods with a small group of eccentric characters outside of the city of Behilit, set in the year 1942. The game takes place shortly after the end of World War II, though history in Fear and Hunger's world hasn't quite happened the same way it happened in our own. For example, a major nation in the game's story, Rondon, is a fusion of France and England. Bremen is more or less Germany, with the ominous Kaiser acting as a stand-in for the problematic Austrian painter. Now you might be wondering, what about America? America, aka Vinland in the Fear and Hunger universe, is a dangerous, nigh uninhabitable blood-stained land. A frontier on the edge. Monsters and demons stalk it unchallenged in their pursuits. So not much actually different from real America then. But in this world, America or Vinland is so underdeveloped that it's irrelevant on the global stage. And if you know anything about World War II, that's not good news for everyone else. For some reason though, the Bremen Empire, who were winning the war, decide to hold peace talks shortly after taking over the city of Behilit, and shortly after peace is established, 14 people from different walks of life find themselves on a train to the ominous city. So that's the backdrop for the game's plot anyway, but what is Termina? So Fear and Hunger Termina, like its predecessor, is a 2D dark fantasy RPG. But even saying that seems like an oversimplification of the game and its mechanics. The game draws influence from Berserk, Silent Hill, Resident Evil and the FromSoft games, with a lot of other pop culture stuff making its way into the game as well. I've heard the first game described as what it would be like if an ordinary person were to be in the world of Berserk. Termina then is what would it like for an ordinary person to be trapped in silent Berserk evil, but if the town were also a thinly veiled excuse for ancient deities to have passive-aggressive slap fights. Also giant dongs are involved, and there's also literally a testicle monster at one point. I love this game. But it should be said that the game isn't for everyone, so I'm going to quickly do that stupid video essay balance thing, where video essayists offer counterviews to their actual thesis, to stand on some make-believe pillar of objectivity. So here's reasons you should avoid Termina. A. Themes of sexual abuse. Basically the same point as earlier. I would argue the game handles the theme with more maturity than its predecessor, and it's far more relevant to the characters and their stories and the overall plot of the game, but it's still fairly explicit. And if it's not something you're interested in seeing in stories, then sadly you should pass on Termina. If violence in general isn't for you, you likewise should probably avoid this one. B. Bleakness Betrayed. The game does an excellent job of building tension and establishing a mood throughout the game's many and varied locations. Though as of this writing, some of the characters' unique endings are a little too sickly sweet and hopeful, especially considering the events of the game. But to be fair, there is an update in the works that does expand on the characters and their backstories, so maybe some of the endings will be changed or elaborated on. But who knows? And that's it. And with that, let's get into the game. When you click New Game on the title screen, you have 8 characters to pick from. Each one has a different backstory, class, and starts the game with different items and abilities. We pick our boy and find ourselves sitting on a train. Ah, this is so peaceful. Now, a game's opening tutorial level is a make or break moment for the relationship between the player and the developer. Like a film's opening scene, it has to do multiple jobs at once. Establish a mood, introduce the player to the mechanics, and get us invested. We open on a train to Behilit. Each of the 8 playable characters is going there for their own reasons, and you'll be given an explanation on their backstory, and will have the opportunity to make a few key choices in their history that will give you the opportunity to get a variance of items or abilities. You don't know what these items and abilities functions are yet though, until you actually try to use them in game. We wake up to find everyone else on the train asleep, save a little girl. She sees us and runs off, Understandable, have a nice day. We follow after her. In the first game, when holding a bow, pressing the shift key would allow you to fire it. I wonder what happens in this game. Oh, we can run. Oh no. We can run. The train is unusual. The other passengers are in a deep sleep, and the cabins are filled to the brim with luggage. More luggage than you'd think would be here considering the small number of passengers. We eventually come to the end of the carriage and walk through an opening, where we find ourselves in an impossible room, a realm made of wood, seemingly designed to look like a twisted fusion of a classroom and workshop, and we're immediately confronted by a pale, mutilated man who demands we get back to work. Like, dude, I'll do whatever you want, just please put on some pants. Intimidated, we go along with the twisted creature, where we're immediately put to work creating wooden cubes, for what reasons we're not quite sure yet, which is where we see the little girl again, who encourages us to follow her. We do, because making cubes is kind of boring, and we easily cave to peer pressure, and it's at this point the man, named the janitor, confronts us again, with murderous intent. Now, we're a big tough man, and we're not going to take this any... Wait, where did my arm go? We lose the fight, and the janitor cuts our legs off and puts us back to work. We now find ourselves as a barely ambulance sausage. We're less than 5 minutes into the game, by the way. Oh god. Oh no. You know, honestly though, I was expecting us to be way worse off at this point. So we drag ourselves in the direction that the girl travelled in, and the room changes into a dark void. And suddenly we're surrounded by giants sitting on benches, who don't seem to notice that we're even there. Who are they? These beings are the new gods. They were arguably the main antagonists of the first game. Their defeat is required to get 7 of the game's 10 endings. Armed with this knowledge then, the better question becomes, what are they doing here? We don't have time to think about that though right now, because we're teleported to the top of a tower where we meet a devilish jester, Percule. And is that the moon staring at us? Percule explains that the ominous staring moon is the old god Rare. They saw us from across space and really dug our vibe. He informs us that we've unwittingly entered a battle royal of sorts, that we and the 13 other passengers on the train have 3 days to fight and kill one another, with the last one standing winning the festival of Termina, and presumably being allowed to leave. 3, 2, 1, we're back on the train. Now, I know from the off, that sounds like a pretty long-winded opening sequence. However, the character's background and the sequence of Percule is completely optional, so if you want to just get straight into the game, you can. So, that's the setup. We've been invited to participate in Termina, there's a guy walking around with his knob out, a girl in red shoes is wandering about, and something about cubes. Also, the moon won't stop looking at us. That's it. That's the tutorial. What, you wanted more? You want to be told how the up and down and side keys work, you absolute infant? You petulant baby? This is Fear and Hunger Termina. So the game's tutorial is a little unconventional, but somehow is a lot more streamlined than the first game. The first game's tutorial literally just threw ravenous dogs at you and wished you the best of luck, and neither game bothers telling you how the controls work, like press X to mourn, because in this game you'd never stop pressing the X. But this opening is actually brilliant when you think about what the player learns from it. Number 1, the items and skills you have are important. You don't know why yet, but the game's mini-text roleplay is clearly hammering that point home, and it's a neat way to introduce the character's motivations to the player in a way that's somewhat engaging. Number 2, combat isn't always the best option. Running away from the sadistic janitor, using the terrain to your advantage, is a far superior option to being turned into the hungry caterpillar, and that continues to be true throughout the game. Number 3, NPCs, like the girl in the red dress, aren't there to facilitate your playing of the game. In fact, listening to them or following their word or gestures blindly can actually result in you being in dangerous situations. But hey, I reckon that demon jester guy is totally on the up and up. Would somebody this fabulous ever do something dishonest? It's also a great tone setter. The game's opening has always reminded me of Un Chien Andalou, a French film, whose directors explicitly created it with the intent on accurately representing what it's like to have a bad dream. Our first tentative steps are filled with bizarre leaps in logic, and our understanding of our surroundings and sudden escalations and de-escalations are really off-putting. We go from a peaceful train to combat with the janitor to an esoteric prison cafeteria to talking with Percule. The rest of the game by comparison is relatively grounded, but this ominous surrealism stays with us. The player traverses the world, always on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop, and this rehaunts us as we make our journey through Prairieville. Speaking of which, so some spoilers from here obviously. Before we go any further, I'd like to talk about the characters available to us. In no particular order, first you have Levi. He's 18 and was a child soldier, having fought in the Great War and distinguished himself as particularly effective as a leader and soldier. He's returning home to Preheville, where he was raised as an orphan after his father murdered his mother. As you can imagine, Levi has a few issues, and he's also developed an addiction to substances that you can't buy over the counter. In combat, assuming he's scratched his itch, Levi is a very effective warrior, but while in withdrawals, a mechanic that can feasibly happen to any of the characters, but Levi specifically is the only one who starts the game with it, he's less effective. And Class A drugs are hard to come by, but when you do find them, the guy is a unit, though he's not one for conversation. Next we have Karen, who is a journalist, and also best girl, don't at me. She's come to Preheville to investigate a mysterious group of people who are said to manipulate geopolitics from the shadows. They call themselves the New Gods, and according to her sources they work with the mysterious Kaiser of Bremen, who Karen absolutely loathes. She's developed a particular ability to persuade people, and she knows her way around an uncooperative lock, which could be helpful in uncovering the mysteries of Preheville. Despite this ability to persuade, Karen is sharp-tongued and impulsive, living up to her name. The first time we meet her, she's arguing with somebody. Thirdly, we have Marina the Occultist. She's an 18-year-old who studies dark magic at the Vatican, who's also a local to Preheville and is returning home after receiving a letter from her father telling her that her mother is dead and that she's to never return home, so obviously she had to come and see what's going on. Marina is a potent spellcaster and functions at her best in a supporting role. She can't wield two-handed weapons, but if recruited she immediately has the ability Engrave, which you can use to permanently buff the stats of every party member. Marina is friendly enough in conversation, though seems to enjoy her own company at times. Next we have Dawn, a fake one-eyed doctor. He's a war veteran and child victim of a deranged sex cult, who's arriving in Preheville hoping to discover answers on the murder of his wife. Dawn was given a slightly unconventional medical education, and thus can do a lot of stuff that other doctors can't do, like instant organ harvesting, accurately autopsying cosmic horrors beyond his comprehension, and of course Magna Medicinal, an ability that allows him to sacrifice a limb to revive a party member should they fall. He's a nice guy, but a little depressive, and despite his polite demeanour, he's not above having an argument, like how we saw in his interaction with Karen. Coming in fifth we have Osar, who's a yellow mage and cultist from Abyssinia, Fear and Hunger's version of the African continent. He's travelled to Preheville at the behest of his master, Nashra, who's a magical talking head. His motivation can be pretty much summed up as because Nashra told him to. He's the strongest character that one can start with, having a higher health pool than the other PCs, and access to potent mid to late game magic and items. Though this does come with a downside. Osar is the only player character that can't use guns, which can be used to avoid particularly hard fights. He's not much of a conversationalist either, and carries an ominous aura about him. He's seemingly the only character here who was aware that the Festival of Termina was even going to take place. Then we have Abella, the mechanic. She's in Preheville looking to link up with her activist group who opposed the Bremen Empire, but when she arrives in Preheville they're all gone, and she finds herself looking to put the pieces of their plan together and hopefully stop whatever the Kaiser is doing. Abella has the ability to make traps and weapons, including the Grinder, not the app, but an OP weapon that'll destroy everybody's insides. Again, we're not talking about the app. She also has a non-magic stun attack that's fairly OP on occasion. She's quite friendly and can be recruited as a companion very early on. Olivia is our 7th PC, and she's the botanist, specialising in the creation of potent potions and poisons, as well as having proficient skills in firearms. She's in town looking to find her sister, Rayla. Because of a rare condition that wasn't treated properly, she finds herself permanently wheelchair-bound. She's got a fairly shy demeanour, but is one of the more friendly characters we can meet. And finally we have Marco. Marco is a boxer and used to work for a gangster who essentially took Marco's sister hostage and forced Marco to kill opponents in the ring. Marco in response threw the gangster out of a window and hatched a plan to skip town with his sister. He's planning on meeting her in Rondon and has arrived at Preheville as a stop. But really, it's just unfortunate timing for the poor guy, though strangely he's the most physically equipped of the player characters to actually face down the horrors of Preheville. In Melee, he starts the game pretty strong, and can become an unbelievable powerhouse and veritable one-man army pretty quickly. All of the player characters have strengths and weaknesses. Some are obvious, but some are not so obvious, but make sense upon playing the game. Let's talk about Olivia for example. The later in the game you find yourself, the more powerful Olivia is likely to be, as you've likely managed to grab all of the best guns, America, and probably also have access to the best poisons in the game, and maybe at this point you'll even have a bit of magical assistance. making Olivia a wheelchair-bound beast. Imagine the movie Commando, but Arnold has to sit down, and you've got the picture. But the early game can be especially brutal. For example, an enemy can knock her out of a chair, stunning you for a turn while you have to re-equip it. So in the early game, when you have no decent weapons, no poisons, and no companions, almost every enemy presents a very serious defeat, even some of the easier ones, so building a party can be the difference between success and failure for Olivia in the early game. But building a party is a challenge in and of itself. If you recall, this is a battle royale. According to Jared Leto, only one person may escape. Your biggest threat then ends up being paranoia. Especially as you advance throughout the game, you encounter all of your fellow contestants in tense, life-threatening situations, or find them standing there, menacingly staring at the walls, and then they turn around, and their faces are different. And some keep secrets from us. In certain areas we find encoded letters that are indecipherable to us, but if Avella is in our party, she'll offer to read them, before telling us that she can't make heads or tails of the encryption. And Abella's reactions to the letters is suspicious, to say the least. You get the feeling she's not being completely honest with us. And then it dawns on us, as we stand alone in a room with her, that maybe her nice demeanour is just a front, hiding a more sinister nature. But silly me, I'm getting ahead of myself. We leave the train, and find the others locked in conversation. Long story short, the train has broken down, and we won't be arriving at our destination anytime soon. What is this, Great Britain? The characters engage in a long conversation, and we get a pretty decent idea of who they all are. By the way, you can skip all of this if you want and just get straight into the game, saving you countless hours of time over several playthroughs. You just have to press one button. One button, Todd. Not difficult. The first time you play Fear and Hunger Termina, you're given numerous paths to head down, or you could talk to your fellow competitors and see what their plans are. We meet August, an old man who seems completely at ease during these strange circumstances, and Hemrick, who's a bit of an arse, and openly sexualizes Abella, causing her to yell at him to do something useful, and he agrees, heading off. We immediately have multiple directions we can go in. On this occasion we're going south, following a path that leads us back up north. We find another passenger from the train, Tanaka, the salaryman. He's concerned about a business appointment in the city that he's late for. We find him overlooking a house that seems to have been ransacked, and the owners have been butchered. We journey further towards the city, hoping to find help, and come across a clearing. We see somebody approaching us, a local by the looks of it, but something seems wrong with his face. But we can't dwell on that now, as a colossal man emerges from nowhere and caves in his skull. Screaming about Termina, we run away and eventually stumble across a small town square. Finally, civilization. We're saved. There's not as many people here as we might imagine, and the ones that are here are staring at us with murderous intent. We find the gate to Preheville, but it's locked. Without 2 keys, there's no way we can... Fuck you, August, you dick. We head left, finding a bunker in the woods, when we're suddenly approached by Abella, who asks us what we're doing here and offers to join us. We search through the bunker, hoping to find a way to fix a train, or at the very least, find some food for everyone. Wait, Abella, can you hear something? Oh good lord, rip Tanaka. We now have to suddenly contend with a murderous clown in the secret underground military bunker. Though of course if you're a more curious player and happen to have pushed one of the blue blocks earlier, you can block the clown man in. Through exploring, we can eventually find the first key. Hooray! And all it cost us was the life of Tanaka, but we are in a battle royal to be fair, so you know, 1 down. And of course we could go the other way, following Karen, and we know this is the direction she went in, because her massive balls have clearly scraped the ground. We'll encounter more weirdness and hostility until we come across a village. The village is filled with people who seem to be melting. They beg us for help and warn us that the moon is what did it to them. It's clear that there's not much we can do to help these people. Regardless of what direction we take, eventually we'll find ourselves at the mayor's manor, where the second key for the gate is. I died several times just getting to this point on my first playthrough, and frankly we're lucky to be alive at all. Hell, we don't even know if Abella is going to try and kill us yet. We find ourselves in a relatively peaceful place, and find a bed, which we crash in, and it's here we discover the greatest enemy we're going to be facing in the game. Time. So to save you rest in a bed, and oh look, there's no coin flip for it this time, great. Oh god, please no. So if you sleep in a bed while there are enemies nearby, they're coming for you, buckaroo. I hope you like having less arms. If however you've killed all nearby enemies, sleeping will take you back to the tower, where you're confronted with the faces of your fellow contestants, and you can talk with the Perkmeister, and here he'll offer us aid. But for now we're just going to save, wouldn't want to lose any progress. We wake up and it's later in the day. We've lost time. Now if you'll recall, Shaquin Phoenix gave us 3 days to kill all of the other contestants and make it to the tower in the centre of town. A day is made up of 3 sections, morning, middle, and night. So throughout a playthrough you have 8 opportunities to sleep before you hit day 3, night 3. What happens after day 3? Well, ideally we won't have to find out, but it's now become clear to us that we need to find a balance between our progress and our saving, because on top of saving, sleeping gives us an extra benefit as well. The Perkster gives us the opportunity to access the Hexen table. What the hell does that mean, I hear you say? Well, replacing a more contemporary experience system is an affinity system, so your character has access to specific abilities within their own talent trees, but can also access the trees of the old gods, an esoteric race of alien beings who embody core concepts. One specialises in offensive spells, another in healing, another in buffing, so on and so forth. And you can access these abilities. Oh, what do I need to do that then? Well, to pay for the abilities you need soul stones, silly. They're very rare to find. You can buy them from certain vendors, but not until a little later in the game. In the early game it's really difficult to find them. The easiest way to get them though is to summon a creepy god from a pool of blood, who will trade you soul stones for human heads. So remember that village of poor people who were peeling their faces off earlier, and who won't fight back if you start killing them? Well, they're a form of currency now, but of course it can't be as easy as that. As you'll remember, I called it the affinity system. So who are we gaining affinity with? Why, the previously aforementioned cosmic gods of horror. But how, I hear you cry? Well, in the game you'll find ritual circles, and if you interact with them you'll be able to use a god's power, which will allow you to save the game without sleeping, or will restore your health and limbs. Or of course you could just brutally sacrifice your less than useful companions, whatever takes your fancy. But don't worry about that for now, it shouldn't come to that, we're all friends here. But there's only a limited number throughout Berserk, and they can only be used once, so use them wisely. But of course even then, it's not as easy as that. So in Fear and Hunger Termina we have 3 bars to manage, similar to the first game. Health, food, which depletes over time and gives us negative status effects the lower it goes, and finally, mind. Casting magic costs mind, which can be recovered by smoking or drinking. Just like in real life, losing mind makes you more susceptible to phobias, which negatively impact you in combat. When it comes to your hunger bar, some food is rotten and can give you negative status effects. Your companions also have 3 bars that you have to manage because they just can't do it themselves, so the entire game is essentially the player juggling multiple plates, with an occasional clown jump scaring us. Also, the game never lets the hunger bar hit 69%, truly the most horrifying of games. We enter the mayor's manor and we're greeted by a tall grotesque named Jeeves, who tells us that the mayor is upstairs waiting for us. Okay. We find the mayor and oh my god, I didn't know Boris Johnson was in this game. This thing was once the man we encountered at the train, Henrik. He's been transformed somehow. Perhaps the same way everyone else has here. He's done it. He's finally achieved the legendary super creep form. He offers us a seat and tries to have a conversation with us. So, hey dude, what's with the horns? Let's talk about combat. Combat isn't fun in Fear and Hunger. Or it is, in the same way that a game of chess is fun. Taking a masterful gambit and pulling it off is the greatest feeling ever, while failing and losing all of your progress up to that point is a uniquely crushing blow. No enemy in Termina ever feels easy, or like there's no risk to fighting them. The Bobbies are a great example of this. They're more or less the replacement for the guards. From their design and name it's pretty clear that they were Prehivil's police force before the city's fall. It's difficult in the early game to face one by yourself because of their multiple attacks, and ability to regenerate limbs. So when you do kill one, you feel a sense of relief. It was a close call fighting them, and we're lucky to have even half the party left after. Did he just stand up? And the mayor is an even tougher opponent than the average Bobby, to be sure, but we could just avoid this fight altogether by having a conversation with the being and not offending it. And it's here we learn another lesson. Our dialogue is important. It has immediate consequences if we're not too careful, and even if we should triumph, we still might be missing an arm or two. And to make matters worse, if you saved before going to the bunker and meeting Abella, when you go there, instead of having this nice conversation with Abella and gaining a helpful new friend, you'll have this moment instead. Jesus preserve us. This is Abella's moon-scorched form. There's no way to have both Hemric and Abella going forward, unless you're playing as the Redhead, of course. The game has several of these soft choice moments. Maybe not to this severity, but situations where you have to make big choices do pop up. And the game forces you to constantly make micro choices as well, that confront the player's morality in subtle ways. Like I said earlier, we have 3 bars to worry about, but so do our companions. And we only had so many resources to go around. In the game you can get an infection, which will either require you to remove the limb, or apply a green herb disinfecting it. So if more than one of your party has an infection and you're all out of bone sores and only have 1 green herb, suddenly you have a few difficult decisions to make. Look, sorry dude, I can't give you this green herb, I only have like 1 left, and if I get... Oh shit, you died. Never mind, lol. And just in case you wanted a little extra temptation to kill your fellow contestants, the heads of Termina contestants are specifically valuable, and can be traded for rare late game items and books. That can make a big difference to the way your playthrough goes.
Oh, hello there.
The Pocket Cat is a trader who oddly only accepts said heads, and we can meet him fairly early on in our run, so if you want access to potent magic early on, you better plan to kill as many of your fellow locomotive enthusiasts as possible, because we won't see Pocket Cat again until the final third of the game. Speaking of which... So for this section, I won't go too deep into spoilers or the specifics of the plot. I have plans to talk about that in more depth in my upcoming series, but I will cover some of the broad strokes. So if this video has made you interested in trying Termina yourself, please close this tab, turn off your computer, and throw it out the window, and buy and play Termina yourself. Actually, don't do that third one, computers are expensive. So the game, in theory, takes place over the course of 3 days, and the more you explore and venture into the dark, the more revelations you'll find. If you don't complete the game in time, the other contestants will one by one become moon-scorched, transformed into grotesque parodies of themselves. Olivia becomes a mechanical monster who can't stand to be seen. Marco becomes a dumb smasher monster, a manifestation of his own guilt and an eternal view of himself as a blunt instrument. These transformations start happening on day 1, and the moon-scorched forms are far more deadlier in combat than they were pre-transformation, giving the player another hard choice over whether to be ruthless from the offset and kill the characters in their base forms, or have mercy and allow them to become borderline unstoppable monsters. If you should sleep a final time and make it to day 4, you too will be transformed against your will, becoming a mangled, depressive parody of who you once were. At the beginning of the game, Percule, a mysterious devil figure, told us that should we fail to win the Battle Royal in 3 days, that none of us would be able to leave Preheville alive. But this is a lie. In my first playthrough as Osar, I failed to complete the game. I had a strong party and planned on marching on the tower to confront Percule and his dark master. Then I fell asleep at the Preheville Bop, one final time, and when I woke up, my companions, who I had outfitted and saved and grew with, were all gone. It was then that I realised it was nighttime, on day 3. At this point everyone else would either be dead or moon-scorched, and I was alone. The tower would not open itself to me until all of the other contestants were dead. And I found out in future playthroughs that if you do take companions to the tower, they'll become moon-scorched there and then, and you'll have a fight on your hands. I had also used my available resources poorly, so when I confronted the monsters that were once my companions, I was vastly outmatched. Ultimately, I just couldn't overcome them all. I could maybe get past 1 or 2, with a bit of luck, but then I'd be overwhelmed. Eventually something wouldn't go my way and I'd be destroyed. Multiple attempts would ultimately prove fruitless, and it dawned on me over the course of my failures that I couldn't win. I'd become too reliant on companions, had failed to use my resources effectively, hadn't been ruthless enough in my acquisition of power. I didn't want to be a murderous madman, and it cost me. Over 12 hours spent on a playthrough for nothing. So the next time I clicked new game and picked my new character, I went back in, and this time I knew what was waiting for me, and I was merciless. If you attack any of the contestants in front of the others, they'll restrain you, and you won't be able to escape the rope until nighttime of day 3. So the direct approach is obviously out. This time I either directly killed or allowed everyone to die. preferably before they became moon-scorched. But I took too long again. This time it was day 3 when I approached the tower, and at this point the twisted, smiling jester revealed his betrayal, that because I wasn't quite ruthless enough for his tastes, I now had to contend with him and the pervert moon Rare. Despite winning the festival, I had apparently taken too long, and while I could defeat Perculate, Rare was just too much for me. So I started again. This time I had to win the festival. I had to kill all 13 contestants and get to the tower before day 3. Which I did. Sorry guys. We arrive at the tower, and this time Perculate is jubilant to see us. He reveals that the festival is actually a bunch of nonsense, and that he's personally using it as a test for people to become new champions of his true god, a vague creature known as Sulphur. So this ending essentially has Perculate sending us to hell, to be reborn in the fires of Sulphur's flame. Which, you know, isn't quite the happy ending I had envisaged, to be honest. So I went in again. This time I was determined to have that jester's head, and get a moon rock if I have the time. The battle overall is tough. Rare especially dwarfs anything we faced up to this point, but we can overcome him with the power of friendship and illegal drugs. Finally defeating the two, we wake up to a beautiful sunrise, shortly before having a mild seizure, on day 4. Each of the 8 characters has a unique ending here. Osar elects to throw the burnt head of his master into a lake, and decides to use his new knowledge to help the people of his home village. Marco opens a boxing gym, Abella becomes Elon Musk, etc. Some of the endings, as said earlier, are a little too fanciful considering that in this scenario everybody else is dead. At this point it seems no matter what, there's no way to really win. Sure, you can complete the game, but the fact that it comes at the cost of everybody else's life doesn't really seem to be worth it. And that's when you notice the name of the endings. Ending C and Ending B. So what the hell is Ending A? Well, we haven't talked about Lagarde yet. What's he doing here? The last time we saw him, he was pretending to be an amnesiac twink and cosplaying as Griffith. Is that still the case, sir? At the Preheville Bop, we can find a map that has 4 locations marked on it. It doesn't describe what they are, but we recognise one of them. It was the bunker from the beginning of the game, where we met that killer clown, and found a bizarre machine. We've already been to the first bunker, so we look at the second. We enter the forest of Preheville, which is relatively peaceful compared to the war-torn streets of the city, but contains its own bizarre mysteries and enemies that stalk and attack us. We find a clearing and get killed by that goddamned horse. Sneaking past the horse, because I'm a scared coward baby, we arrive at the second bunker, and once again find an odd device that we activate. The third mark takes us through the sewers, where we arrive at a cave and, oh no, it's filled with scousers. We find another machine and turn it on, and then we travel to the final mark, the museum, where we come across a massive bunker door, which can only be opened by activating the other 3 machines. We enter it, and it shuts behind us, trapping us forever. We travel down and down, fighting and evading the elite guards. Super soldiers, unquestionably loyal to the Kaiser. At the bunker's very bottom, we're confronted by a monstrous Hydra. We barely manage to survive, but we move on, once again finding ourselves surrounded by the new gods from the beginning of the game, where we meet the eponymous Yellow King, the man once known as Lagarde, now known simply as the Kaiser. He plans to unify humanity using what he calls the Logic God, to create something of a hive mind, one mankind, standing in stark contrast to Perculate and the Sulphical, who are all seemingly individuals who seek the ultimate freedom, to behave in whatever depraved hedonistic ways they wish to. We push past him and onto the final challenge, and should we overcome that, we get treated to this shot of all the characters we managed to save back on the train, safe and sound, presumably going to continue living their lives away from this nightmare. Our character though is seemingly dead. We managed to save some of these guys though, so there's that. But then I was thinking, why stop here? We saved a few, but what if we can save all of them? And you can. You can get so good that you can literally save everyone, except one person. Doing this requires you take the burden of the game's cosmic horror onto yourself, facing the game's greatest monsters, and ultimately giving the other characters a way to escape. But it's really hard. Even on the easiest difficulty, it feels borderline impossible at times. Which is why, as of this recording, I still haven't done it yet. But the game's character writing really convinces you to give it a go. There are several moments with the characters in the game where you become genuinely endeared to them. For example, on the 3rd day, right before night, we find Karen, the strong, hard-nosed journalist who trudged towards the city alone on her first day, just sitting here on the beach, staring off into the distance. and all of her arrogance and bravado is gone. We talk to her, and for the first time in the game she lets her guard down, exposing one of her greatest vulnerabilities. Karen is a journalist who sees herself as a Valkyrie, carrying the last messages of dead soldiers back to the civilized world, in essence capturing a part of their soul, their truest moment. Her critics though call her a vulture, a carrion bird preying on the carcasses of the fallen to advance her own career, and despite her protests to this, it's clear that she does fear this to be the case to some extent. Her moon-scorched form is the Valkyrie, which looks closer to a vulture than anything else. In this run I actually killed Karen, attempting to save myself and win the festival, and I must admit that I actually felt really bad after, because in this moment, not only was she on the verge of giving up, but I already had. The game is filled with these moments where we spend a brief, fleeting moment with a character that succinctly humanizes them and reminds the player what's truly at stake here. All of these characters have stories and dreams, and we know this because at this point we've most likely done most of their opening scenes. We could talk about Marina's reconciliation with her father, or Marco teaching to knock out a box so he'll know how to defend himself, or Olivia's reaction to being told you're taking a dancing, or the entire party's reaction to you if you attack another contestant, pleading with you to stop and even questioning your sanity. But at this point I don't think I need to. Although, I can't help but think, given everything we've experienced this far, and everything we know about the Great War, the Termina festivals, Sulphur, Rare, and all the rest, maybe Lagarde has a point. So what is Termina about? Broadly, it's a story about a lot of things. War, cycles of violence, sexual abuse and trauma, collectivism versus individualism. But oddly enough, more than anything else, fundamentally, Fear and Hunger Termina is a game about hope. Okay, I'll admit I cringed a little when I wrote this, but it's actually true, stay with me. Hope and perseverance are not just themes in the game's writing, but in its mechanics. If you persevere as a player, you will get better, you will overcome all of the game's challenges, and eventually defeat its greatest bosses. Your character doesn't level up in Termina, unlike a more typical RPG, but in a strange way, you do. Every step you take, every enemy you face, you'll get better, you'll learn more, and you'll know when to chance your luck. Persevere long enough and dedicate enough time to learning and getting good, and one day, maybe, just maybe, you'll load up the game, start a new save, and enter Preheville. Except this time, you'll be the cosmic horror to everything else. Holy shit. If you're still watching at this point, all I can say is seek immediate help. So if I have one hope with this video, it's that at the very least some of you give this game a shot. Even if I did kind of spoil some of it, sorry. If it's not obvious, I adore this game and its predecessor, and honestly I didn't touch on about 80 to 90% of the game's plot or interactions, so if you do decide to give it a try, there'll still be plenty of surprises in store for you. With all that being said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to black orb that like button, moonscorch that subscribe watchamajigger, and defecate uncontrollably in the comments.